Picture the scene. It's the 19th century, and you are standing inside the massive London Metropolitan Tabernacle. You can practically feel the dramatic tension in the room. A highly anticipated figure steps right up to the pulpit for the very first time, looks out over this vast sea of faces, and delivers these exact words. I would propose that the subject of the ministry of this house shall be the person of Jesus Christ. That was Charles Haddon Spurgeon, literally drawing a line in the sand on day one.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the ultimate architectural blueprint for faith, right out of our source text, a really fascinating devotional study. We're going to unpack exactly what it means to build on a singular foundation, and how this specific structural integrity is described as, well, the only way to withstand life's most brutal storms. Section 1, Spurgeon's Unwavering Creed. Okay, to really grasp the weight of Spurgeon's opening words, we've got to look at the sheer volume of his life's work. I mean, his legacy to the body of Christ worldwide is staggering. We're talking massive catalogs of sermons, deep Bible commentaries, numerous books on prayer, devotionals, magazines, and even poetry and hymns. But, despite this massive catalog of gifts, the source material makes a really interesting point. Absolutely nothing was as pungent or as memorable as that opening creed on his very first day.
So the crucial takeaway here is that Spurgeon pinned, and I mean permanently bound, his entire ministry to one single foundation. If you asked him what his creed was, his reply was simply, it is Jesus Christ. He viewed Christ as the absolute substance of the gospel, the one who is in himself all theology, and the incarnation of every precious truth. There was absolutely zero room for ambiguity there.
Which brings us to Section 2, Paul's blueprint for Timothy.
You see, Spurgeon wasn't just inventing some new approach, not at all. Tracing this timeline, we see a direct path starting way back in the 1st century with the Apostle Paul's letters to Timothy, going straight through to the 19th century with Spurgeon, and all the way to the present-day believer. This foundational cornerstone, it has remained completely unchanged across millennia. Now, to understand why this is absolutely critical, we have to look at the contrast Paul presented. He gave Timothy a pretty severe warning against false prophets. Notice how these false teachings are defined. They're full of fables and genealogies that are entirely devoid of godly edification, just empty noise, really. Paul contrasts that empty noise with the absolute necessity of doctrinal purity, where Jesus Christ simply has to be the cornerstone.
He strictly defined the true gospel, anchoring it right there in 2 Timothy 2:8. He was basically reminding Timothy that any teaching is completely incomplete without this specific foundation. The true gospel absolutely must encompass the teachings of the life, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. If you're missing those elements, well, it ceases to be the gospel entirely.
Moving on to Section 3, the cornerstone analogy. Think about a massive building undergoing a heavy stress test. The text states it so clearly. Removing a cornerstone is akin to degrading the whole structure. I mean, if you yank out that primary support stone, the exact piece that determines the position of everything else, the whole structure degrades and is at risk of total collapse. In the Christian faith, as outlined by Paul and echoed by Spurgeon, Jesus isn't just some decorative feature on the building. He is the load-bearing cornerstone holding up the entire gospel of salvation to the world. Without him, the structural integrity is compromised right at the base level.
Section 4, Worthless Without the Center.
So this actually brings us to a pretty sobering question. What actually happens when we try to build without that load-bearing stone? Well, the consequences are stark. A gospel with Christ is a solid, completely immovable foundation. But without him at the center, all our grand efforts, all those religious activities, they basically become a worthless, degraded structure that just can't hold any weight. The devotional text is remarkably blunt about this. Mere religious activity simply cannot substitute for the cornerstone. Just look at this list: gospel preaching, massive crusades, church meetings, and various other religious activities. The text argues that without Christ as the central focus, none of these are even worth the effort. They literally cannot support the weight of a person's life.
Which leads us to Section 5, Anchoring Against the Storm.
So why does all this architectural integrity matter so urgently? Well, because storms are an inevitable guarantee, right? Your foundation is going to be tested. The text outlines this very clear, honestly dangerous progression to ruin if we start to drift. Step 1, it starts subtly, just shifting our gaze and emphasis away from Christ.
Step 2, that little drift leads to embracing the popular trends of modernism and relative philosophies. And then finally, step 3, because the foundation is lost, the structure sinks and is completely swept away by the tides and storms of life.
But thankfully, there is an alternative. If we stay perfectly aligned on that cornerstone, the result is entirely different. The text promises that by keeping Christ as the central focus, individuals will experience a strong, firm Christian life. A life that the tides simply cannot wash away and the storms literally cannot shake.
The devotional concludes that absolutely nothing must separate us from the love of God revealed through this salvation. It is the sure anchor for life and for eternity. And it really all boils down to two incredibly powerful clarifying words: Jesus only. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this deeply provocative thought, straight from the source text's conclusion. Consider this a moment to inspect your own structural integrity. Ask yourself, does your theology place Christ in the absolute first place? Because according to the text, any theology that places Christ in no place, or honestly even in second place, is entirely spurious. So check your foundation.